on the opposite end of nostalgia, there's a movie that we picked out only because it came out this year.
Yes. And when we picked it out, we were unaware that it was actually a sequel.
The third in a trilogy, in fact.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm.
uh, oh well. This is a good experiment because, in theory, a movie should be able to stand on its own. Like, I'm going to talk hypothetically here for a second. I think that if you just stumbled into The Empire Strikes Back, I think you could figure out what was going on if you had no other idea.
Yeah, and you could probably do that with The Dark Knight.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
yeah.
You might have some questions with when you got to the third movie in both of those trilogies, but
Yeah.
yeah, it, I guess I'm saying is that a uh, a good movie will be a good movie even if you haven't seen the previous ones.
Right. Yeah.
But so we watched Maxine or Matriplexine. I'm assuming it's just Maxine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is part of the series of X films by Ty West, which I had honestly never heard of before. We picked this one out on HBO Max.
No, I had never heard of it either. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's definitely falls into that slasher category, although they're definitely trying to do some social commentary here, especially since the movie takes place in 1985. So you have all the stuff going, all the different like controversial things that were happening at that time that certain people didn't really like very much. But
And what's amusing about that is that that actually would work both ways, no matter how you phrased it.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, now, so Maxine stars Mia Goth. I haven't actually seen a picture of her outside of this movie. She has a if that isn't makeup, she has a very interesting freckle pattern on her face.
yeah,
In fact, let's look this up. I'm curious now because Mia
yeah.
Goth.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that. Well, I mean, I guess it's possible that makeup artists would put freckle pattern on there like that, but I mean that's a lot of work.
Okay, so
Uh,
it
oh,
no
okay.
actually
Well,
yeah.
they
So I
did.
guess it's part of her makeup for her character.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. That's interesting. Huh.
And now I'm wondering if we're looking like idiots to people who watched the previous movies. Like, no, you idiots! That mark on the side next to her right eye is a burn that she suffered from in the previous movie, not part of her freckles.
Like, oh, yeah.
But anyways, but enough about speculating about movies we haven't seen. This is basically
Yes.
operating as a first reaction, um, newbie reaction to this thing.
Yeah, yeah. So the plot of the movie, we have Maxine Minx, not her real name, of course.
Hmm.
Um, she is a spicy content actress, um, and but she's trying to get into the mainstream,
Hmm.
which even today is virtually impossible. I mean, the only actress I can think of off the top of my head that was doing movies like that and actually got into what you would call mainstream would be Tracy Lords. She did a lot of spicy stuff in the '80s, and then uh, she then she was able to do like B movies with like I think she made some movies for Roger Corman.
Okay,
Um,
look, Roger
yeah.
Corman would hire her just because she was attractive and probably wouldn't ask for too much money.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I think part of the reason it's hard for them to get out of there is what gets you into there in the first place if your actual objective is being an actress. Like you're probably not going to see the next Sir Laurence Olivier getting spotted in a stag film.
No, no.
Although I say that, and then of course the immediate counterexample comes to mind of Stallone. So there you
Yeah,
go.
right. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
so she's getting into a horror movie, which is actually a logical progression. Like, um, what would a adult movie actress be able to get a role in?
yeah, it would be a horror movie that's probably, because back then horror movies were kind of considered like exploitation, so it would be,
Right.
yeah, that'd be a nice little transition there. Yeah, and there's, of course, they show the scene where she's auditioning and does the line reading, and then right after that, and then the director's like, "Okay, take your top off so we can see your boobs." Like, oh, okay,
Yeah, because horror movies in the '80s, you were probably going to see some of that.
yes, yeah, um, and
S-
yeah,
Yeah, and what's clear is that even for those of us who hadn't seen the previous movie, that she has a past that is catching up with her, just as she's hitting her moment of triumph.
right, yeah, and the bodies are starting to pile up.
Yep.
Yeah,
So, what I'm just going to say right off the bat is that let's go through like a strengths and weaknesses analysis here.
yeah,
So, strengths of the movie is it definitely makes you feel like you're seeing the era. Like, I feel like they probably researched it down to like when this movie takes place, down to the month, just to have like the exact right. Like, it's when St. Elmo's Fire came out, and you have an old recording of Casey Kasem saying that, and now the number one song in the country is St.
yeah.
Elmo's Fire.
Yeah, yeah, and of course it's the movie takes place in the backdrop of the Night Stalker, who was this it was a serial killer in L.A. At the exact same time.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was this the same? Wasn't that a real thing? I didn't even consider that because I
Oh
hadn't heard of
yeah,
Night Stalker.
oh yeah, yeah. There's actually a really good documentary on Netflix about it if anyone's
Okay.
curious. They and two of the people they talked to, they interview in it, were the two detectives who were uh, trying to trying to catch him. But yeah, no, it's yeah, yeah, he was an evil man. He was an evil man. Um,
Okay. So,
and good to see you, Arcos.
okay, so this thing almost acts as like historical fiction in another way, even
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
like a movie that makes up an identity for Jack the Ripper.
right, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so those are strong points. I would say that Mia herself is perfectly fine in this one.
yeah,
Um, Perfectly fine to good. There's a couple of scenes where like she's very good at doing what she needs to do to sell the emotion in a scene.
oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
she isn't necessarily being pushed too far by the script, but that's just like that sounds way meaner than I intended it to. No, she's good. She's good
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, the acting overall I thought was really good. I mean, you had Kevin Bacon playing a, a scumbag private eye,
from Louisiana.
from Louisiana. You had oh, I just lost his name.
Uh,
Uh,
well, Giancarlo Esposito was
yeah,
Maxine's agent
right, Giancarlo Esposito. Yeah, he was good. Um, and the detectives I thought were really good. The guy detective was in Old Dads with Bill Burr.
Oh, yeah, he was the one dad who like actually had kids first, and like
No, no,
was
no.
being pushed around by his wife. Was that the one?
He was the one who he had a kid the same age as Bill Burr's, but he was one who he was always trying to be really cool.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The one who was like trying to be like a Zoomer.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, the acting performances were good. I really liked. I do have a bit of a soft spot for whenever Hollywood becomes self-deprecating. Like this movie is it's self-deprecating towards Hollywood. Like they do poke fun at the industry. They poke fun at like just the or and make it very clear that the town can be really bad for a lot of people.
Yep. Right, because you're kind of seeing like the off. It's like the equivalent of off, 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 off Broadway.
Right. Yeah.
Um, now, as far as weaknesses go, I don't know if okay, this isn't necessarily a weakness. What I'll just say is that without the context of the previous movies, a lot of what Maxine did in the movie seemed maybe a little bit overkill.
Yeah.
So by which I mean, like, there's a scene where she is accosted by a guy with a switchblade, and she whips out a gun, and then um, is a bit brutal with him,
Yeah.
to put it mildly, in a non-spoilery way.
Yeah.
Now, now, this just being my first encounter with the character, I actually was wondering, okay, is she like actually the stealth villain of this thing?
Yeah, I wondered that too. Yeah. Or at the very least, like she's not a good person.
But so overall, she does mostly keep to. Okay, this is I always call this the Bugs Bunny rule because when Chuck Jones directed Bugs Bunny cartoons, his rule was that Bugs was never allowed to be the instigator of the problem. Like, somebody had to push him, and then he would go all out against them.
Yeah.
I would say that whenever I think about like how much does it feel appropriate for a character to be getting revenge on another character, I always kind of use that proportionality test in my head. And this movie mostly follows it. Like, if a guy is accosting you in a back alley and traps you, and has a switchblade, and he's clearly going to try to have his way with you against your will. Pretty much whatever you do to him at that point is worth it, or is justified.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, yeah, I didn't feel sorry for that guy, but
no, eh, but what I will say is that trying to avoid spoilers here.
yeah.
Is that in the end scene, I did without the context of the previous movie, when her past comes a knocking. Um, I didn't necessarily think that it felt like something she did to the bad guy felt warranted.
Yeah, it seemed a little yeah, it seemed too over the top. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
eh,
I believe the phrase is excessive force.
yes, there you go. Excessive force is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So I think that what I will say overall is that this is not my typical fare of movie. Um,
Mhm.
like I would actually call this like grindhouse ish.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this could very easily have been one of those movies. If it came out in the 70s or eight, it has a 70s exploitation feel to it. Now that I think about it,
Yeah,
yeah, sort of like Last House on the Left and I Spit on Your Grave.
yeah.
Maybe not as extreme as those two, but you know, kind of in that same you know sandbox.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now, I feel like talking a little bit about spoilers. So, if you very much want to see this movie after hearing us talk about its merits, which again, like if you like this type of thing, I know plenty of people who like gore for its own sake, who like extreme violence for its own sake, where I just kind of cringe when I don't feel like it's hits that proportionality. Um, you're probably gonna like this.
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah,
Um, Now, it's available to stream right now for free on Max,
yes,
which I will still sometimes call HBO Max because that rebranding was stupid because you took away your distinctive part of your name.
yes,
But yeah, spoilers in
yes.
one, two, three.
Mm.
All right. What I thought was really funny is that at a certain point I realized, oh, this is just a more serious version of the plot from Dragnet.
It is, yeah, yeah. Very similar. Yeah, like similar villains, similar yeah, like messaging. Yeah,
Right. Just that rather than one guy pretending to be a pagan, he was just a moral majority type.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so this is another one where learning after the fact that this was a sequel suddenly made the lack of setup for the villain make sense because, well, of course you know her dad, the Southern preacher hypocrite guy. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, why he's been the villain in at least one other movie.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
like Pamela Voorhees in the first Friday the 13th. You know?
right, exactly. So, of course you know who he is. Of course you're invested. Of course, anything that Maxine does to him feels completely justified.
Yeah.
Um, Without that context, what it felt like was you had an opening act that was very strong in setting the scene and introducing you to Maxine's character. You had a middle of the movie where you were dealing with the father's minion, Kevin Bacon's Louisiana detective.
Mm.
And then the Louisiana detective gets offed in such a needlessly brutal way, and in a way where I was thinking to myself, wait, he had information that would probably help you defend yourself against whatever comes next.
Yeah. Like, yeah, yeah, that's a trend I've been seeing in movies a lot lately, where you have a character like that, like, like, "Whoa, I can help you out. I knows things," and then the main character's like, "I don't care. You're dead."
Yeah, yeah. Like so, they basically they catch him, and then they wake him up, or they wait for him to wake up in the car, and then they crush that car in a car compactor,
Yeah.
and then they have a couple of dogs come over to lick up the blood to clean things up. I'm just thinking to myself, well, first off, that's just like again, there's that law of proportionality, right?
Yeah.
Like, had he successfully killed anybody? No. Had he gone after her? Yes. It's like she very much didn't want to deal with the police when really it's like turn him into the police.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she clearly didn't wanna talk to the police, because every time they tried to talk to her, she's telling them to, F off. Yeah.
Right. Or like at the end of the movie where she is standing over her father as the after a couple of police people have died, and there's a police helicopter over her telling her to lower her weapon, and she still uses this like sawed-off shotgun to blow up her dad's head in front of them,
Yeah.
and nothing bad happens to her because of this.
Well, it was LA in the 80s, when you take out a guy like that, they probably aren't going to really care that much. It's probably going to be hard pressed to find a jury that would convict her for killing her religiously fanatical father.
Uh, I mean, I wasn't even thinking that far. I was just thinking like, oh, says the person in the police helicopter who might have like a rifle or something, armed person just killed somebody else who we don't know who they are. Better
Oh
put
yeah.
her down.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, yeah,
Um, and I kind of felt like the movie was maybe it's like again a criticism I had while I was watching was okay, yes, Southern religious type, clear and obvious, immediate villain. Haven't seen this a billion times before, but I'm going to assume that based on like little flashbacks you get from the previous movie, that whatever happened to him was deserved.
yeah, yeah.
I'll also say that it made it make sense why they didn't explain more about her backstory and just kind of hinted at it the whole time.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can't ding the movie uh, for penalizing us for coming late to the show.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely assumes that you saw the other movies.
Yeah, I don't know if this one requires both movies to see or if it's just Pearl.
Yeah.
I think this is a direct sequel to Pearl.
Okay.
Um, I'll say that overall, I'm not necessarily rushing out to fill in my gaps in the Maxine lore,
Yeah, I'm really not either.
but it was perfectly serviceable. And again, if you're in the target audience for it, I think you'll get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I mean, horror movie fans are a very accepting lot. Um, in that, they'll give you a chance, like, no matter what you make. And yeah, like I would imagine there is a a good subset of horror movie fans that are, that like these movies. Yeah.
Yep. All right. That's all I personally have to say. Daniel, do you have any closing thoughts?
Uh, no, I think I've said all I need to say on this.